you are standing in the sun, not for a few minutes, for hours every single day, for your entire life, because there is no roof, no sunscreen, no shade you didn't build yourself. Your skin is the only thing standing between you and a star that is quite literally capable of destroying the DNA inside your cells. And yet you're fine. You're more than fine. Your skin has figured out exactly how much sunlight to let in and how much to block out, calibrated over hundreds of thousands of years to the exact patch of Earth your ancestors happened to live on. That calibration is written into your genes right now, in this exact moment, whether you're pale enough to burn in 10 minutes or dark enough to withstand a full day at the equator without a mark. Here's the part that should stop you. Every single human being alive today, every shade, every tone, every variation you've ever seen, descends from the same population of dark-skinned humans who lived in Africa less than 300,000 years ago. Not really the same, which means somewhere along the way, some of those humans changed dramatically, physically, genetically, in a process so specific that scientists can now trace almost exactly when it happened, where it happened, and why. And the answer is stranger, faster, and far more interesting than they moved somewhere colder. So let's actually ask the question nobody explains properly. Why did ancient humans go from black to white? And more importantly, why did it only happen to some of them? Let's start with what skin actually is, because most people walk around without ever thinking about the fact that it's not just a covering. It's an organ, the largest one you have, and its color is determined almost entirely by one substance, melanin. Melanin is produced by specialized cells called melanocytes. And here's the detail that surprises people. Every human being, regardless of skin tone, has roughly the same number of melanocytes. The difference isn't how many pigment-producing cells you have. It's how active they are and what kind of melanin they're pumping out. Two types matter here. Eumelanin, which is dark brown to black and offers strong protection against ultraviolet radiation, and pheomelanin, which is reddish-yellow and offers considerably less protection. Populations with more eumelanin have darker skin. Populations that produce more pheomelanin, or simply less melanin overall, end up lighter. This sounds like a minor biochemical detail. It is actually the entire story, because melanin isn't cosmetic. It's a shield, specifically a shield against ultraviolet radiation, the same radiation that causes sunburn, DNA damage, and skin cancer. And near the equator, where humans first evolved, UV radiation is relentless, intense, and present almost every single day of the year. This is where the story actually begins, and it begins with a problem you've probably never considered. It begins with folate. Folate is a B vitamin, essential for cell division and critically important during pregnancy for the healthy development of a fetus's neural tube, the structure that becomes the brain and spinal cord. Here's the twist. Ultraviolet radiation destroys folate in the bloodstream, not slowly, rapidly. Studies have shown that intense UV exposure can degrade folate levels significantly within just a few hours. For early humans living under the punishing sun of equatorial Africa with minimal or no clothing, this was not a small inconvenience. Low folate during pregnancy is strongly linked to neural tube defects and pregnancy complications, which means, in blunt evolutionary terms, humans with less melanin near the equator would have had measurably worse reproductive outcomes. Their bodies weren't protected, their pregnancies suffered, and natural selection does not forgive that kind of disadvantage for long. So dark skin, rich in eumelanin, wasn't just useful near the equator. It was essentially mandatory. It blocked enough UV radiation to protect folate levels, protect against DNA damage, and protect against skin cancers that, while they don't always kill before reproductive age, can still meaningfully affect survival and fertility over a lifetime. For the vast majority of human evolutionary history, which took place in Africa, dark skin was not a variation. It was the default. It was, quite simply, what worked. Now, here's where the story turns, because at some point, and this is the part most people get completely wrong, ancient humans started leaving Africa. The migrations out of Africa that eventually populated the rest of the planet began roughly 70,000 years ago, though earlier smaller migrations happened even before that. And as these groups moved north, into Europe, into Central Asia, into the higher latitudes of the world, they ran into an entirely different problem: less sunlight. not none, less. And weaker, more angled sunlight for much of the year, is particularly during long winters where the sun barely rises above the horizon at all. This is where a second nutrient enters the story, and it's the one most people have actually heard of. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is synthesized in the skin through a chemical reaction triggered by ultraviolet radiation, specifically UVB rays. It is essential for calcium absorption, bone development, immune function, and a long list of other biological processes. Without enough of it, humans develop rickets, a condition that softens and weakens bones, and in ancient populations, severe vitamin D deficiency could be genuinely life-threatening, particularly for women, where a deformed pelvis from childhood rickets could make childbirth catastrophically dangerous. Here's the collision. Dark skin, so effective at blocking UV radiation near the equator, becomes a liability in low sunlight environments because it blocks the very rays needed to produce vitamin D. In a place like Scandinavia or Northern Europe, where sunlight is weak for much of the year and nearly absent for months at a time, heavily melanated skin simply cannot synthesize enough vitamin D to keep a population healthy. It's not a small trade-off. It's a matter of bone density, immune resilience, and reproductive viability, generation after generation. So evolution, working exactly the way it always does, without intention, without foresight, simply through the brutal math of who survives and who reproduces, began favoring lighter skin in these populations. Less melanin meant more UV penetration. It meant more vitamin D synthesis, meant healthier bones, stronger immune systems, and safer childbirth. Over thousands of generations, in these specific latitudes, lighter skin wasn't a cosmetic drift. It was, once again, exactly what worked. Dad. Now here's the detail that should genuinely surprise you, because it directly contradicts what most people assume. This transition did not happen gradually and evenly across all of human history. Genetic evidence suggests it happened relatively fast. And relatively recently, researchers studying ancient DNA have found that some of the specific gene variants associated with lighter skin in modern Europeans, particularly variants in a gene called SLC24A5, appear to have spread through the population only within the last 8,000 years or so. Let that sink in for a second. That means many of the early humans who lived in Europe thousands of years after the initial migration out of Africa, humans who had already been living in low sunlight environments for tens of thousands of years, were still dark-skinned. Ancient DNA extracted from skeletal remains, including a well-known specimen from Britain nicknamed Cheddar Man, who lived roughly 10,000 years ago, suggests he likely had dark skin and blue eyes, a combination that would look almost alien by modern assumptions about what an ancient Britain looked like. This means the lightening of European skin happened surprisingly late, likely accelerated by the shift to agriculture, and that detail matters more than it seems. Here's why. Hunter-gatherers, even in northern latitudes, ate a diet naturally rich in vitamin D, primarily from fatty fish, organ meats, and animal fat. Their food supplied what their skin, still relatively dark, struggled to produce. But when agriculture spread and diets shifted toward grains and plant-based staples, that dietary source of vitamin D largely disappeared. Suddenly, skin synthesis became the primary, sometimes only, source of this critical nutrient. And that's when the pressure to lighten skin intensified dramatically, fast enough that scientists can actually observe the genetic sweep in the archaeological record. In other words, farming may have done more to turn ancient Europeans pale than the cold ever did. This is the point where the story stops being simple and starts being genuinely fascinating, because skin color didn't evolve on one single dial that slides from dark to light. It evolved independently, multiple times, in different populations through different genetic mutations, converging on similar outcomes through completely different biological pathways. East Asian populations, for example, developed lighter skin, largely through different genetic variants than European populations did. Researchers have found that genes like OCA2 played a significant role in East Asian depigmentation, a different mechanism producing a broadly similar outcome: lighter skin suited to lower UV environments. This is what biologists call convergent evolution. And it's a powerful piece of evidence because it shows that lighter skin wasn't some single lucky mutation that spread outward from one place. It was evolution solving the same problem. Sunlight scarcity, multiple times, independently, in different corners of the world. And it's not just about dark versus light either. Some populations evolved intermediate skin tones as an evolutionary compromise, enough melanin to protect folate and prevent sun damage, but not so much that it blocked vitamin D entirely in their specific environment. Populations in regions with moderate sunlight, moderate seasonality, and mixed environmental pressures often landed somewhere in between, which is exactly what you'd expect if skin color really is a finely tuned adaptation to local UV exposure rather than some arbitrary trait. There's another